Hi guys, welcome to Office Blokes React. I'm Office Bloke Dave.
I'm Office Bloke Mike.
Office Bloke Daz.
Collectively, in a room, all three of us make the Office Blokes.
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah, I'm not wearing a hat today.
Oh yeah?
You wash
What's
your hair?
gone wrong?
No. No,
That'll be daft.
Sunday yesterday. He has a bath once a week whether he needs one or not.
we usually don't. No, I met one of Ash's friends for the first time at the weekend, and she nicked my hat in the club while we're dancing.
Really?
And she took a shine to it, and I went, you know what, keep it. Don't give a shit. Don't
The
worry.
Office Blokes Reacts hat.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah.
You could enter to win this one,
Oh,
Dave.
no, no, someone's won that one, but
they have.
we've got, you know, it's not like it was one that I've
I
sought
missed it.
after and spent a load of money on.
Right.
Mr. D.
Yeah, anyway. So I might be hatless for a couple of days. Who knows? This is that Legal Eagle channel
I liked it.
that we did. What was the video we did the other day?
Legal in the USA, illegal UK or something like that, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, or the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And I said that I've seen him break down scenes of Always Sunny in Philadelphia and stuff like
That's
that.
right.
Yeah.
So this is the Constitution doesn't say that, which I think could get people chatting in the comment section a little
Yeah.
bit.
Right, okay, this would be
Yeah,
interesting.
that's one of the reasons I queued it up, because I thought it's one of them where you always get people who say that's the law. You're not allowed to do that. You can't do that. You can't do this. You can't do that. And then you get someone who's I don't know what you call them, keyboard lawyers or whatever you call them.
Yeah.
And it's someone's always got an opinion because they've heard it from someone else.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it's the law.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, it's not. That's not actually law, mate. Have you found that? Have you got it in writing where it is?
Yeah.
And no one can ever back it up.
A lot of people assume that their moral compass is how the
Yeah.
law must be
Yeah.
written. So they're like, no, that's disgraceful. And it's like, actually, that's just how you feel about a certain topic.
Yeah.
I've argued with people like that. Not that I know anything about the law either. Been to court a few times.
Oh, I was going to say, you must know about it.
Let the judge figure it out. That's what he's paid for.
Yeah.
That's their job.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's get into it. I will say one thing. Family Guy did a sketch years ago that was the right to bear arms in the Constitution, and someone came up and went, no, it's the right to bear arms, and people have got bare arms. It's like, you've got it wrong, boys. Anyway, let's do it. The Constitution doesn't say that.
It's not your fault. I mean, that thing is like 7 pages long. Who has time to read that? And there's like 24 amendments. Pfft. But it's not your fault. Everyone is wrong about the Constitution. Think about this phrase, from each according to his ability to each according to his needs. In 1987, the Hearst Corporation conducted a survey to mark the bicentennial of the US Constitution. Over 50% of survey participants thought that that phrase, from each according to his ability to each according to his needs, was part of the US Constitution. And this wasn't a one-off result. According to a 2002 Columbia Law School study, nearly 2/3 of persons polled thought that this phrase came from the Constitution or from one of the founding fathers. But this phrase does not appear in the Constitution. James Madison, the author of the Constitution, didn't say it either. So, who did? Well, this was written by none other than Karl Marx in 1875 and then parodied by George Orwell in Animal Farm. Marx wasn't the first person to articulate this idea. Scholars trace the concept to the New Testament, which states in part, and distribution was made unto every man according as he had need. Now, the Soviet Union eventually incorporated the slogan into its constitution as, quote, from each according to his ability to each according to his work, but that has never appeared in the US Constitution. So you can imagine if Americans confuse the US Constitution with the Soviet Constitution, they're probably wrong about a whole bunch of other things. Let's talk about it. One thing that people...
That phrase.
I'm confused already.
I know, yeah. I was looking at it and I'm like, what does it actually mean?
They should modify it all into modern language.
Yeah.
Plain English.
Yeah.
There is a plain English society, isn't there? Which,
Is it?
yeah. You know, to come up with, yeah. Well, you get all things like, phrases and legal talk and things like that. But the plain English society, I think they're called that anyway. They come out and just say it as it is.
Layman's terms.
Layman's
sort of,
terms, basically. Yeah.
Interesting.
get wrong all the time is thinking that the Constitution mandates that English is the official language of the United States. That same 1987 Hearst survey found that 64% of the people believed that the Constitution made English the official national language of America. But English as the official language has never been part of the Constitution. Although English was the dominant language at the time the Constitution was ratified, many other languages flourished as well. The most common languages included Dutch, French, German, and the many languages spoken by Native Americans. Enslaved people spoke African languages as well as made their own English-based Creole languages. And most of the Founding Fathers favored bilingual education. Thomas Jefferson spoke English, French, Italian, Latin, and he could also read Greek and Spanish. Wow. He hoped that America would establish establish colleges that would teach in French, Spanish, German, and other languages. Others, like Ben Franklin, saw it differently and said things that were incredibly offensive and Malthusian, saying, quote, "Those Germans who come hither are generally the most ignorant, stupid sort of their own nation. They will soon outnumber us, that all the advantages we have will not, in my opinion, be able to preserve our language, and even our government will become precarious."
It's funny how the fear of the other goes back hundreds of years, and it's like the Germans, and then it sort of morphs into a different kind of other over the centuries, doesn't it? It's just always been there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a weird one. Bloody Germans.
Luckily, he didn't win the day on that one. Now, states with large German populations disagreed with Ben Franklin, at least initially. In the 1800s, Pennsylvania and Ohio passed laws allowing German to be taught in public schools. Of course, however, Americans have consistently attempted to limit the speaking of other languages in this country. Politicians have tried to introduce a constitutional amendment making English the official language, which would force the government to stop providing bilingual services. So far, these efforts have failed. And while a constitutional amendment hasn't passed, Congress historically has passed all kinds of laws that would prevent people from speaking non-English languages. For example, in the 19th century, the government forced Native American children to attend missionary schools. In 1887, the Bureau of Indian Affairs decided that mission schools on reservations were required to provide all instruction in English. Children who used their own languages were bullied and beaten by the instructors. This, of course, led to immense language loss. And, of course, French was the dominant language in the Louisiana Territory for over 100 years. The first Louisiana constitutions made English and French the official dual languages of the state. But Louisiana was a melting pot for different ethnic groups, and eventually their dialects merged to produce what we call Louisiana French. But in 1921, Louisiana adopted a new state constitution which reversed the policy of bilingual rights. The state banned the teaching of French in all public schools, which highlights one of the differences between the U.S. federal constitution and individual state constitutions. But of course, these trends continue to this day. Representative Louis Gohmert introduced the English Language Unity Act of 2021, which would declare English as the, quote, official language of the United States to establish a uniform English language rule for naturalization and to avoid misconstructions of the English language texts of the laws of the United States pursuant to Congress's power to provide for the general welfare of the United States and to establish uniform rule of naturalization under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. Of course, the reason that Gohmert wanted to pass this law is because it's not in the Constitution at all. And Gohmert's bill was referred to committee where it died. But putting language aside, surely that old chestnut, no taxation without representation, found its way into the Constitution, right?
That's the only one I've heard of so far. No taxation without representation. I've been lost on everything else.
I kind of get the thing of unifying a specific language as the official language, because it's like with crossover, like you said there, with law.
Yeah.
You can have like a lot of crossover, sort of like different meanings with different language.
Yeah. Things don't perfectly translate, do they?
Correct.
So you don't want any ambiguity in it.
No.
Yeah, I didn't realise a lot of different states had their own constitutions as well.
I didn't know that either.
I thought the
Constitution.
US Constitution, I didn't realise they had those. So...
Surely that old chestnut, no taxation without representation, found its way into the Constitution, right? Well, the popular history of the American Revolution goes something like this. The colonists got so fed up with King George III's high taxes that they chucked British tea into the Boston Harbor, decided Americans would henceforth become coffee drinkers, and wrote a constitution ensuring that no one would ever be taxed again without being adequately represented. Well, as a resident of the District of Columbia, I would have to take issue with this particular summary of American history. In the 1700s, the colonists objected to the Stamp Act and other similar laws that imposed taxes on them because they couldn't vote and didn't have representation in Parliament. And in response, the English came up with a theory of virtual representation, which meant that since Parliament existed, every British subject was represented, regardless of whether they could vote. Of course, the young American colonists didn't exactly take to this early version of Zoom meetings. After all the pontificating about taxes and voting and the subsequent War of Independence, perhaps the biggest surprise of all is that the taxation without representation didn't make it into the final cut of the Constitution. Though the colonists did try hard to work it into the founding documents. The Articles of Confederation incorporated a we hate taxes stance by denying the federal government the right to levy taxes at all. This sounded cool on paper, but was a really big mess in reality because the new government couldn't pay its war debts. It also couldn't raise enough money for an army or navy. The British occupied forts in the Great Lakes while also dumping its convicts into the colonies. And so for this and many other reasons, the Americans had to write a new governing document that eventually became the Constitution. And you had better well believe that it gave the federal government the right to levy taxes. The problem is they forgot to mention that in order to levy taxes, everyone needed to be adequately represented. The state and local authorities also got the power to levy taxes, but the end result is that the Constitution doesn't guarantee no taxation without representation. But the motto is still a rallying cry for the disenfranchised populations, especially in the nation's capital, where I live, Washington, D.C., which is also the only geographical entity in the contiguous United States whose citizens must pay taxes and register for selective service without having political representation in Congress. Well, at least political representation that can actually do something. DC residents pay more taxes than residents in 22 states and pay more money per capita to the federal government than any actual state. Now, we are not the only ones. Who else pays taxes without representation? Well, undocumented immigrants pay about $7 billion a year in taxes. Inmates pay taxes, and so do formerly incarcerated people, even if their voting rights have not been restored. American children work and pay sales tax and income tax, but they lack the representation of a vote. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's a whole bunch of taxation without representation in the United States. And that's probably because the Constitution doesn't guarantee that right.
I didn't get that bit where it says undocumented immigrants pay
Pay
taxes.
loads of taxes.
I'm
I
assuming,
thought he was going to say don't pay.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's just through buying things and stuff, though, is it? And because if they're undocumented, then you
not
wouldn't have
paying
thought they'd be
income
able to
tax.
tax the wages, would you?
I don't know how the
If
tax
they're
system works over there. Maybe the employer takes the tax first.
Do you know what would be a
Right,
great
okay.
idea, though? Like they've got in the USA, where each different state has its own tax liabilities.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We can imagine if we did that over here, especially with what's going on at the moment, where taxes are going up, they're increasing the taxes on a national scale. But you can imagine if they said, right, if you lived in Newcastle, you only pay 4%, whereas if you live in London, you're going to pay 28%. And
Yeah.
if you live, it'll make people move around into these other
yeah.
areas and boost the economy, wouldn't it?
It certainly could do, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a big thing for people, isn't it? Paying less taxes, you
Yeah.
know, having more money in the pocket and everything like
Yeah.
that. And could be
But if
to
you moved
regenerate
into these,
certain areas.
to these areas and sort of like drop the tax down, then maybe you'd,
Yeah, a big good way of encouraging other companies to come into your area as
Yeah.
well, I suppose, wouldn't it? You know,
Yeah.
if a company like, say, Manchester, they can put lower taxes than, say, Liverpool or wherever,
Yeah.
you know, it's going to encourage companies to come there more, I suppose, isn't it? So,
I think our system, there's no form of progression through competition, is there? So there's no, like you say, you can't just lower the taxes in an area and then other areas have to compete and then
you can get grants.
industry benefits.
You can get grants from certain regeneration
Yeah.
areas,
Right.
where they give you sort of like, they give you. We were offered. Remember, we got offered a free warehouse in Liverpool.
Oh
To
yeah,
move to a part of Liverpool, Merseyside,
yeah.
and they put on transport for the staff and everything for the first 2 years,
Yeah,
or whatever it was.
that's
And I
right.
was like,
Yeah,
wow,
yeah.
Yeah.
But it just didn't materialise.
No, it's not really very feasible,
It
is
wasn't
it?
feasible for us. No.
No.
for some companies it would be, wouldn't it?
Absolutely,
It'd be, you know,
yeah.
for some companies it'd be absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
But it just depends what business you're in, I suppose.
If it was pre-pandemic, you know, if people actually saw that coming, where everyone's going to be working from home and
Yeah.
stuff, there'd be a lot of companies that would take them up on that offer. I
Yeah.
think because
Yeah,
people
yeah.
don't have to commute. You don't
Yeah.
worry about it.
But then you wouldn't need the big facility.
But you got it anyway, and you
Yeah.
can use it for
Yeah.
whatever.
Discos,
Yeah,
illegal raves.
yeah. Illegal barbershops.
Americans hate taxes, but they love shopping, and a lot of people think that they have a right to enter a particular store, or at least they have a right to contract with other people, the freedom to contract. This guy believes he has a constitutional right to eat at the Trump Grill in New York City. But here the police officer contends that a reservation is not a constitutional right.
It's not a
I
guarantee.
can't revoke my reservation.
It's not a guarantee. It's not a constitutional right.
The protester is in fact wrong about his constitutional right to keep his dinner reservation, but this is an interesting question. Do people have a constitutional right to enter a store or a restaurant?
I've seen multiple Karen videos where they're like, "You can't throw me out of here. I'm an American citizen," and they're like, "This is private property."
I think it's down to the owner or the manager, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the manager's over here. It is anyway. It's the manager's
their
manager's
discretion, isn't it?
discretion. Yeah.
I think
It
it's
is.
the same over there when it's private entity or private property. You
Yeah.
can kick anyone out.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course you can, yeah.
You should be kicked out even if you're complaining anyway. If you complain about not being allowed in, just say, mate, do one.
Yeah, if the only reason you can get in is because it's a constitutional right,
Yeah.
not because
They don't want you there.
Want the
Besides, just stay home, mate.
I don't want to eat here or anything either,
Yeah.
by the way. I don't want to drink, I just want to come in.
Yeah, I think because that was that Trump Towers.
Don't
know
like
where it was.
It said
Said
it
Trump
said
Grill,
Trump,
didn't
yeah.
it? So,
Trump Grill or something,
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's probably more to that story, isn't there? Someone
would
trying to
guess
get
so,
in there
digging
and
down
break
into
it.
it.
I didn't recognise if the cop was NYPD or not.
Right.
Didn't really
Yeah.
pay much attention to it.
The Constitution is often silent about most things, so it shouldn't be surprising that no one has an explicit reference to where people are allowed to be. But the 1980 U.S. Supreme Court case Pruneyard Shopping Center versus Robbins said that the Constitution does not give people an absolute right to enter and remain on private property, even if they intend to exercise their First Amendment right to free expression. So if this man wants to get into a restaurant to protest, he doesn't actually have a constitutional right to do so, despite the First Amendment. But what about if the city or state government has imposed a vaccination requirement to enter? Does that violate the Constitution? Well, so far the answer is no, because not all unequal treatment violates federal or state laws. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 explicitly prohibits restaurants from refusing service to customers based on race, color, religion, or national origin. A restaurant can't refuse service to black people or white people or Muslims or atheists, for example, but when it comes to other classes of people, it's a complete toss-up. They can do what they want. Restaurants and business owners have argued that they have a religious right to refuse service to gay and transgender people because of the owner's religious beliefs. Now, the Supreme Court has yet to definitively settle that issue, and it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with the Supreme Court over the next few years on this particular issue. It's definitely going to come up. But when a local regulation prevents unvaccinated people from entering a restaurant, which is what happened with the situation in New York City, we're not talking about a protected or quasi-protected class of people based on their race, ethnicity, or gender. That means a lower standard of review, in other words, rational basis review, which basically no law ever fails. So the bottom line is that the Constitution is not going to protect your dinner reservation if there is a specific enforceable law that says you can't go inside. Then there's a phrase that I think everyone is familiar with, the idea that the criminal law presumes that you are innocent until proven guilty.
That's a well-known one, isn't it?
Yeah, again,
It's a well-known phrase. Don't know if it's in the Constitution, but
whenever there's a post about a footballer over here, that's what the whole comment
Let's
section
not
is.
go too far on that one.
Yeah. Go on.
the Man City footballer, or are you talking
Any of
Man
them.
United footballer?
Any of them.
Yeah.
There's
There's a lot of them.
There's been one or two, I think,
A
over
few,
the
haven't
last
there?
few
Yeah,
years.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was playing Call of Duty the other day and I got killed by a guy called Mason Greenwood. I just didn't get my phone out quick enough to get a snap of it.
Shooting in the arse.
Anyway, that's one that I assumed was legit, and I've heard loads of Americans say it as well. Constitutionally, you're innocent until proven guilty. But then, how can you incarcerate someone that's innocent until proven guilty?
Well, that's the idea. The innocence side comes. You got to go to a court of law to be proven guilty, haven't you?
Yeah.
You don't go to a court of law to be proved innocent.
No,
because you've been charged, but you're saying you're not guilty. We're saying you're guilty. Let's go to trial.
They have the onus is on the prosecutor to prove guilt, not the other way around.
I think it's a bit of both, isn't
works,
it?
Isn't it?
Still got to prove you're innocent at the same time.
Oh yeah, but
Yeah.
I mean, on paper, I think it's that they have to prove the case.
Yeah, because I mean, sometimes people don't even talk. They'll just won't give any evidence at all. Sometimes people are accused,
Which
then
is
it is down to the prosecution to say, right, this is why you're guilty.
No comment.
That is a constitutional right, isn't it? Fifth Amendment.
Yeah,
I know one of them. It's probably not going to be true.
Yeah,
It'll be the next one on here.
it's probably not on it.
Now, that idea that you are presumed innocent until proven guilty is one of the most significant principles in American law. The rights of criminal defendants are very much part of the Constitution. For example, the Fifth Amendment bars self-incrimination. Quote, no person shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself. This is known as the right to remain silent. The Sixth Amendment requires that people be given a speedy and impartial jury trial, an attorney in criminal prosecutions, and establishes defendants' right to confront adverse witnesses. And the 14th Amendment provides for due process of law. However, the Constitution does not require that a state prove that someone committed a crime beyond a reasonable doubt. And the Constitution doesn't say that you're innocent until proven guilty. Now, I'm not saying that the concept of innocent until proven guilty is not important, but the bigger point is that not all fundamental rights can be sourced directly to a line of text in the Constitution. Astute legal eagles probably already know that many of our important legal principles come from English common law. But the presumption of innocence has a more complicated origin story. It isn't found in any of the sources we traditionally cite for English common law, like the Magna Carta or the English Bill of Rights of 1689, or treatises by Coke and Blackstone. In fact, this presumption comes from Roman law and canon law, which form the common law of Europe. And eventually this principle made its way into common law in a very roundabout way. In Coffin versus the United States, the Supreme Court held that the presumption of innocence was a bedrock concept in the American criminal justice system. Then Justice White credited this to an Irish jurist named Leonard McNally. McNally was known as a zealous advocate for Irish defendants who were accused of treason. And during McNally's lifetime, the British system required 2 witnesses to prove someone guilty of treason, unless the accused was Irish, in which case 1 witness was sufficient.
Wow.
After McNally's death, the English press found out that despite his years of advocacy for the presumption of Irish innocence, McNally was, in fact, a double agent. He represented Irish revolutionaries in court, but reported on their activities to prosecutors for at least 26 years. Despite McNally's dubious role as a double agent for the government, today the principle of innocent until proven guilty is fundamental to the criminal justice system in the United States, despite it having no reference whatsoever in the Constitution itself. Now, that's just the tip of the iceberg.
That
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Irish people only have to have one person to go, he's guilty.
I know, yeah.
It's cracked.
Still the same now, isn't it?
Of things that you're wrong about the Constitution. But this video isn't over, because there's another Legal Eagle video about even more things that you're wrong regarding the Constitution. Not you, obviously, but your friends, probably. Things like the filibuster and the separation of church and state. And this full-length companion video exists exclusively on Nebula, because sadly, if I put it on YouTube, it'd probably get demonetized and there's no way that you'd ever see it.
Segway.
Yeah.
Nice.
I like this guy. I like the way he breaks it all down and he talks clear.
Very well spoken.
He's really good, isn't he?
Puts into perspective type thing.
Yeah.
You know.
I was lost on a couple of them. The early on ones to try and wrap my head around, because I'd never heard that statement said before. Maybe they're more commonplace in the States that people do spout on as fact.
Well, I think like anywhere, you're going to get people who spout off what they think the law is, like I said before. And people, they do it. I don't know why. Sometimes people just think they have the right to do this or they have the right to do that, and you go, mate, it's not. It's the law.
Yeah.
It's the law. And I go, where are you seeing that? Where do you get that from?
Yeah.
Have you seen the one where people get pulled over by cops in America, and I think they call themselves a citizen of Earth or something, and they're like, I don't consent to your laws in this country. I'm a citizen of Earth, which grants me rights to blah blah, and they start spouting all these things like the fact. I can't remember exactly what they say, but it's one of them where the cops just get their notepad out and they're like, yep, sure, here's your ticket.
Yeah. Section him.
Yeah. It's just when people are so adamant that they've heard something on the internet somewhere that guarantees that. I think it's to do with the idea that it's policing by consent or something, and then they're saying, I don't consent to being policed.
There's a lot of misconceptions out there, and the internet's just made it worse, I think, because people pick up these wrong things and think it's law.
It happened during the pandemic, didn't it?
Yeah.
Conspiracy theories.
All sorts. Yeah.
I don't know. You had doctors on talking about different things, and then all of a sudden, we had someone who's like a gardener, from Withenshaw, telling you how it should be.
Yeah,
I'm like, mate, I'm taking my medical advice from the doctor.
Yeah,
not
exactly.
from you.
Someone that knows. Yeah. What I do like knowing is my highway code. So if someone cuts me up or they think they've got right way, I'd like to know that I'm right, so I can give them a mouthful.
Yeah,
I've never read it.
Have you not?
I read it when I was a kid.
Not once.
Passed my test.
I did when I was younger.
It's changed last year.
Yeah, even now there's one or two things crop up, and I'm going to check on that. So I like to make sure if I'm going to abuse somebody verbally, that they cut me up, that I'm in the right.
They changed a lot of the laws to accommodate cyclists and pedestrians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never read it. It's just that I had the DVD that was the practice test, and I just took it over and over and over
we
and
didn't,
over, and over again.
We didn't have to do the theory test when we passed our test.
So I did, but they asked us about 8 questions, mainly road signs, and that was it.
Can you read that? It was as you were driving. You probably had to go into a centre and do a physical
had to answer
theory test.
Ours was just in the car.
Yeah, ours was in the car.
He sat there with a couple of sheets of paper. He said, "What does that mean? What does that mean?" But learning it was just literally reading a book. We didn't have any computers or anything like that. Not when I was taking it anyway.
When I had it,
I just learned the answers. There was 50 questions, and I think you had to score 45, something like that.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
and
it was
a bit different these days, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, but the law, you're always going to get a few just because that's the law, and you go, is it though? I call people out all the time online on Facebook and stuff like that. I say, how do you know?
Yeah,
it's the law. Where? Show me.
Exactly.
From my experience of the law and the court systems, they're there to compel, and this is civil courts, not criminal courts, but they're there to compel people to come to an agreement before they have to step in and make a judgment. And my experience of it was like, you think you're going to court and they go, actually, this says this and that law says that, so this is what's going to happen. And it can take years to get to the point where a judge actually does that.
Money.
Yeah,
Money for the lawyers.
the whole thing is just encouraging dialogue and then sitting in a room with barristers, and it's a bit of a scam, a little bit. Things could be expedited a lot.
An expensive scam.
Yeah.
Best thing to do. You have it all. I'm gone. Right? See you around.
You heard me moaning about all that at points. I would have done that if I could, but there's just no way to walk away from certain things.
Yeah.
Not without...
There's a wood burner at stake. You've got to be all in, haven't you?
Yep, and a steak. You're right.
Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed that. Don't forget like and subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Cheers. Guys.